Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to Conference Conversations, an interactive online talk show where we discuss key issues and questions related to the work of the Conference on the Future of Europe on a regular basis. These conversations are organised under the auspices of the Conference Observatory, a joint initiative by the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the European Policy Centre, the King Baudouin Foundation and the Stiftung Mercator, which aims to observe, critically analyse and inspire the deliberations of the conference and develop proposals to improve the EU's future participatory and democratic architecture. My name is Jacki Davis. I have the privilege once again of moderating our conversation today as we focus on a crucial question. As the first round of citizens panels comes to an end at the conference, we're going to ask, do the European citizens panels work? With me today to discuss this, delighted to welcome Gaetane Ricard-Nihoul, who is from the Common Secretariat of the conference. Great to have you with us. Thank you for finding the time. Yves, Mathieu, co-director and founder of Mission Publiques, who've organised something like over 1,000 citizens dialogues in 125 countries around the world. So great to have you with us too. Dominik, Hierlemann, welcome back, senior expert at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, and welcome back to Corina, Stratulat, senior policy analyst at the European Policy Centre. So, very quick housekeeping before we get underway. You are all muted for now. If you want to join our conversation with a question or a comment, then please either click on the raise hands button, and when the time comes, I will allow you to talk and ask you simply to unmute your microphone, or click on the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box, and write your question. And please be as brief as possible so I can see at a glance who your question's for and what you want to know. Lastly, if you want to tweet out about what you are hearing, please use the hashtag Conference Conversations, as well as, of course, you can use Future of Europe and COFOE. So let's start, Corina, before I turn to our guests, with a quick update. We've had a busy couple of weeks since the last conference conversation. What's been happening?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Jacki. It's good to be back. Well, what's been happening is that things have gotten a lot more exciting over the past 2 months. Since, as you mentioned, the first sessions of the 4 citizens panels planned for the Conference on the Future of Europe have already taken place. As you know, each of the 4 panels deals with a different thematic cluster and will have to meet 2 more times from now until the end for a total of 3 sessions per panel. So we're still at the beginning of a long and complex process. But remember all that thinking and talking and writing and speculating that we've been doing so many times before September, including in this conference conversations format, about the setup and details of the process, about what to expect and so on. Well, the actual implementation of the different conference elements has properly commenced now.
And that's what we're going to talk about. Has it worked?
And this is exciting because it gives us finally a more concrete basis to discuss both process and policy.
Absolutely. We've also had, Corina, have we not, a linked event, the European Youth event took place last week.
Indeed, I mean, I don't know how much time you allow me, but there's been 3 other main developments around the conference, which I think are important to mention. So the first is the European Youth event, the 4th edition, which took place earlier this month at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. And this edition was dedicated to the Conference on the Future of Europe. Among the young people who were part of this initiative, there were also 200 young people who have also been invited to join the panels. And so they discussed together ideas under the motto, "The future is ours." 20 ideas resulted from this and will be put now forward to the conference plenary, which will take place as early as this.
And very briefly, the other 2 developments?
Yeah, well, if you allow me, linked to the youth event, what I also found interesting is that the Parliament has issued in advance of the event a Eurobarometer youth survey. And there are very interesting findings.
We'll come back on that. We'll come back on that a bit later on. Just want to get a sense of where we are.
The other 2 updates is that the European Commission's Joint Research Centre has launched its Competence Centre on Participatory and Deliberative Democracy. And that's not all. Paris City Council established this month a permanent citizens assembly composed of 100 citizens who will be able to draft bills for voting by the council, suggest citizens' juries, and take part in decisions linked to participatory budgeting. A national citizens' assembly could also be in the making in Germany to advise the new government.
Okay, so not only lots happening at the conference, but it's already beginning to have those spin-off ripple out effects. Going to discuss all of that. And of course, coming up this week is the conference plenary, when some of those citizens who were at the panels will be representing all the rest of them and putting their ideas forward. Want to hear more about how that's going to work a little bit later on. But let me please now, I want to turn to our guests first. And just by way of introduction, this conference co-chair, Guy Verhofstadt, tweeted this weekend, great stories coming out of the conference citizens panels. Admirable engagement, empathy, and eagerness to get constructive results here. So lots of enthusiasm, Gaetane. But before I get your sense of what actually has been happening in more detail, for you, before this process began, before you became part of the Common Secretariat, did you believe this conference really would be an important moment for giving citizens a voice? And how do you feel about it now? So is your view the same as before it started, or is it slightly different now we've begun to see it in practice?
Well, you wouldn't be, hello everyone first, thanks for having me here. You wouldn't be very surprised if I answer yes. This is what I've been working on for a while now. So if I didn't believe in it, obviously it would be more difficult. So yes, I do believe in it. And the reason why I do is because I have experienced a much bigger openness to all kind of democratic innovation that I have seen before. I've worked in the institution for a long time now. So an appetence for maybe more risk in order to test innovation. And I think we should acknowledge that and be proud of that, that we are entering new ground and that we are doing it with ambition, because what we have done with the digital platform, with this European Citizens Panel is unprecedented. And I think we should take the time to acknowledge that and be optimistic that this will bring a new dynamic. I am pretty sure of that. Citizens first participation dynamic, because the citizens themselves, they bring their own dynamic into the system. And also a dynamic for the institutions themselves, because I think once you have open doors, they are open and it's promising for the future also. Testing new ground will mean perhaps more and more innovation coming later on. So yes, I am optimistic.
Thank you. We'll delve into some of the detail about how it's been working in a moment. But Yves, lots of excitement, lots of enthusiasm there from Corina and from Gaetane. From your perspective, did you have high hopes before this process began? And how do you feel about it now? Has it met your expectations so far?
So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. We finished panel 4, session 1 on Europe in the world and migration yesterday. So I'm a bit jet lagged from Strasbourg, if I may say. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I created Mission Publique in 1998, and my dream was that what is happening now happens. So it's fantastic to have reached a point. It's just a point. That's not the end of the process, to have reached a point in 2021 where decision makers have decided to not only put resource on that, but create a political process to make sure that the voice of citizens is really embedded in the political process. And for me, the panels are a fantastic moment, but what is fantastic here is what is planned into the plenary. Because in fact, we know by experience, you mentioned the 1,200 citizens panel that we have organized with partners all over the world. It works all the time. Today, the citizens are ready when you invite them to talk inside a framework, to take time to do something more than answering 10 questions in a polls in 10 minutes. They are there and it works. We know that it works. The difficult point is to go from the citizens' deliberation to the decision making. And this can only happen if there is a process that is planned. And what is fantastic with the process of the Conference on the Future of Europe is the plenary, plus the process that will follow.
Okay.
And this is a guarantee that it's not going to be a report from citizens, but it's going to be the input for a political process.
Absolutely. I'd like to come back on how you see that working a little bit later. But Dominik, you are a great enthusiast. You have expressed in the past some concerns about really how far the outreach will be, how well it will work. As we are now at the end of that first round, are you more optimistic, less optimistic than you were at the start?
An enthusiast with concerns, that's a pretty nice description. So look, I mean, if there is one thing that the conference has shown, then it is that it is less about technical problems, how to do citizens' participation, how to do it better, yeah? And it is more about political will and commitment. And there I still have a couple of doubts, I must say, from the technical side. So, I mean, it's amazing to see. So it's been a huge logistical effort. So congrats to everyone involved, really. So all the technicalities work really well. And I also think from a cultural point of view. So this is just amazing to see how citizens from 27 member states interact with each other in 24 languages. And we tend also in the participation community, we tend to focus on that cultural aspect. Yeah, the kind of true European spirit we see evolving here. And I still would like to go back to that part as well, because I mean, some decades ago, no one has ever thought this is possible, to bring together that many citizens in one place, to really involve them in true European policy making. So on the other hand, of course, there is aspects, as I just mentioned, with regard to political commitment, with regard to political will. We will be talking about that today, how the results of the conference of the citizens panels will be fed into the plenary, what actually happens with the plenary. And you know, the citizens panels will hardly be successful if the conference overall will be a failure.
Absolutely.
So, and that remains to be seen.
Thank you. And Corina, you co-authored a paper at the end of last month analysing the first couple of panels. And I think I would say you said, yes, a success, some shortcomings, some things that need to be ironed out, but they are, I think your phrase was, went to considerable lengths to design a process that does take respect of the fundamental elements of deliberative exercises. Are you as enthusiastic, or even more? You sounded very enthusiastic at the start. Now that it's underway and it's happening, is your sense that, yes, something rather magical is happening, and as Dominik says, technically remarkable, but also remarkable in output terms? We'll come later to what you call the elephant in the room of impact, but in terms of the process.
Yes, well, I don't know. I should specify that I'm very excited that we finally have some meat on the bones of the conference, if I can say so, so that we can speak on a more concrete basis about this process. That's what's exciting me for now. But I have to reserve some concern, as the other panelists, about what actually this process will produce, and to what extent citizens' input and citizens' preferences and recommendations will actually reflect in whatever comes out of the conference at the end. With regard to the panels, I mean, indeed, my colleague Johannes Groibel and I were observers at the first session of the first European Citizens Panel, which took place on economy, youth, and digital transformation. And for us, indeed, the impression was that the panel was set up by organizers with quite a bit of consideration of fundamental elements of deliberative exercises, and it did work to engage the participants, to expand their knowledge and leave a long-lasting impact for them. Of course, not everything went smoothly, but for us, this had a lot to do with the nature of the topics discussed, which are too broad. They're too broad for citizens to be able to delve in them at any meaningful level in such a short period of time. This is why at times we actually felt that we were probably witnessing more of an exchange of spontaneous and to a certain extent unconnected ideas rather than properly thought through contributions and debates. But again, we put this on the back of the choice of thematic clusters, too broad, than on the organizer's choice of methodology. We also noted a few issues with regard to the role of the experts and facilitators, and also about the narrowing of the themes. Time didn't help the work that was carried out in this regard, and more could have probably been done to ensure better coordination. But again, I have to agree with what has been said, that the panel demonstrated that we already know a lot about how to put together proper deliberative processes that, you know, are geared towards producing results.
Let me just dive in a little bit. And Yves, from on the ground, in terms of that comment Corina just made about the topic, she felt the one she was looking at in some detail, it was too broad. It didn't quite give them the space to get into detail. But also I'm wondering, you know, the choice of topics, did that fit with the sort of things the citizens were coming out with? This is the hardest thing in a way, isn't it? You have to predefine to an extent what they'll talk about without closing down the discussion. How did that actually work in practice in the sessions?
It was, in fact, this aspect of choice of topic was very easy because the panels covered the 9 topics of the conference, which are presented on the platform. So the choice made with the Secretariat was to cluster the topic to make coherent topic, to make sure that the 4 panels will cover the 9 topics of the conference. But this being said, for the citizens, they receive a mandate to address the topics. So once they have the topic, they dig into it. So
they don't say, hang on, I want to talk about something completely different. Why can't I talk about X?
Right, but that it's very easy. I mean, they have a mandate in the panel to address a topic. If they want to address other topics, they have the platform. Right. They can use the platform to contribute. They can use the platform to organize an event and to feedback the event that they will organize if they want specifically to address a topic. But it's not in the process of the panels that we can address that.
And so how much detail were they able to go into in their discussions?
Well, in the discussion, it's a discussion that will last 3 sessions. Yeah. So let's see that from the point of view of citizens. The citizens arrived in the Parliament in Strasbourg. He or she received the mandates. The first thing is create a common ground between the citizens. This common ground was created by a session dedicated to me and Europe and my desire for the future. 2 sessions were dedicated to that. So it created a common ground. It helped to talk about values, about first thoughts on the topic, but on Europe more general. Then there's been a session with experts that talk to the plenary of the panels. And this was done in order not to narrow the topic, but to show the diversity of the point to address when we talk about the topic. For instance, migration, clearly they understood that it's not about closing or opening the borders, that it's more complex than that. And then they took 2 half days to dig into that and start by saying what they wanted to say. And this helped us to identify streams and substreams of discussion and really to consider the citizens as the experts, because they come with their vision, with their experience, their walk of life, and the process that we put, and it works perfectly well, helped to end this first meeting by framing the topic that was proposed to them by the conference into 5 streams and substreams of discussion, and this will be the input for the next sessions.
And so just to briefly follow up before I come to Gaetane, Yves, what for you was the biggest challenge in that process you've just described? Yves, and then I'll come to Gaetane.
Sorry. The biggest challenge was to really stay focused on the citizens and to make sure that each of them considered that they had something to say, even if the topic was far away from them. And so that's the talent of the facilitator, to make sure that each person considers that it's her or it's good seat to be there and to contribute, even if they consider that it's a topic they never had ideas about.
So very inclusive process that everybody joins in. Gaetane, for you, anything to add in terms of how that process actually worked and what you saw as the challenge? And my next question, if this was a framing discussion, and then we have the other two sessions, how do you feed a framing into the plenary? How do we get from last weekend and what's happened over the last 4 weeks to what happens at the end of this week? What's the linking mechanism?
Well, first of all, I'm happy that Corina mentioned that we did, apply a methodology that's working, because we really worked hard on trying to make the most of the framework that we had. And as you rightly said, the clusters we know are very broad. So we decided to dedicate this first session into agenda setting, actually. And I actually really liked the fact that the citizens could do that process. It was very interesting, because even though we know that, of course, we take less risk when the first question is more focused, better framed, and so then the work they have to do is more limited to a certain aspect of the debate. I think it's also quite exciting to come with a big cluster that they have to and they have to decide what they want to focus on. For me, it was actually really interesting to see that process and to see that it's worked the fourth time in a very good way, actually. And I was very impressed that there was no group finally saying, we haven't finished the work, please give us half an hour more. Everyone finished on time, and every time we ended up with the 5 streams, sub-streams, everyone endorsed it in the plenary. And in the last plenary, actually, of panel 4, we also witnessed already really good deliberative moment in the plenary on the streams themselves to say, maybe we should change this and this. So I must say, I come out of this first sessions really impressed by what I've done, and happy that the methodology we had designed worked. And of course, it means now that indeed they have the frame, not the recommendations yet. So they will simply present to the plenary where they are in the process. And there will be a debate about that, but it's not exactly the same content, obviously, as the December and January plenaries, where they will actually discuss the recommendations. So 2 panels with presented recommendation in December and the 2 others in January.
And for you, the biggest challenge in terms of, you said you were delighted with the way it went. What was most difficult? You told us what you liked. Was there anything for you where you thought, oh, that's not really working how I envisaged, we need to work on that, refine that in some way? Or do you think you've really got all the nuts and bolts in the right place, as it were?
Well, we did already learn some lessons from one session to the other, and improve some bits and pieces there and there. So for panel 4, I think probably they had the best of the 4 sessions. But I think for me, the challenge, of course, is the more the page is blank, the more the expert input is tricky, because then you bring in the first people who speak have more influence when the page is a bit more, empty. So we had to really design that quite carefully, really brief for hours the experts who are not used to that. They're used to come in a seminar, say what they want, their opinion. Yeah. So we really had to brief them for hours, saying, look, this is not the usual seminar. We need you to give a general overview, not your personal opinion, the state of the debate, so explain what the different challenges are, what are the debates around them, but not what you think about them.
And that's a challenge for an expert.
It's a challenge for an expert, and it will remain until the end. So what we have to do is make sure that we have diversity of expert input. We have enough time also for citizens to digest it. And of course, now that for the first session was general overview, it was not really the time where they get very deep on the topic. So now that they will deepen the different issues, we will need to be even more concentrated on making it right, this expert input and diverse. And also from now on, we will do it adapting to what they want.
Absolutely. So it's a constantly adjusting. Dominik, I mean, that's an interesting point, isn't it, about the experts? The choice of experts, absolutely crucial. The briefing of the experts. And from what I understand, some saw their roles slightly differently to how others saw it in different panels, in different sessions. What for you is the biggest challenge to get this right? Is that it or something else?
Well, it is the experts, and it's also a couple of other things. I fully understand that Gaetane and Yves are pleased with the process, but perhaps not just for the sake of our discussion, but also generally a couple of other or different remarks. I think expert involvement is a crucial challenge, and some experts were quite opinionated, and others were rather framing the topic, which I liked, because citizens are entering the room and they've got to understand what the topic actually is about. But that, of course, relates to another topic that also many experts, they don't have a clue about citizens' participation and those kind of deliberative formats. They've also got to get accustomed with such a process, and they are also kind of on that learning curve. From a more theoretical point of view, I would say three things are always key. And the first is the process inclusive? Is it deliberative enough? And is it effective? So inclusive, yes, I think there are many different voices, and we can see that. There are perhaps a couple of people, with color missing or some others. Yes, that can be done better. But overall, I think there is a quite diversity in the room. Then deliberation, here I would echo a little bit what Corina said. So it was very often, for my taste, a sequence of different statements. But that has also to do, of course, with the translation, with the interpretation that is going on. So it is actually not that easy to do it, and we're still learning how to do it better. So I fully understand that. But with regard to the three different panels, so the three different phases, of course, now kind of the funnel got a bit smaller. But there is really a hell of a job to do in this second panel, which is only online, because now participants really have to develop their ideas. They have to come forward with very concrete proposals. And from a deliberation point of view, of course, the question is, how much time for deliberation do they actually have? How much time for reflection? Can they revise their own opinions, their own thoughts? And this is, of course, a tricky thing to do. And finally, so is it effective? As I said at the beginning, that remains to be seen. But very honestly, so I would have loved to see more politicians in Brussels, more people from inside the institutions, because I think they all have to learn how these processes work, and not many of them do fully understand how difficult it actually is to do these deliberative processes.
Corina, anything to add in terms of the scale of the challenge? It is remarkable, frankly, that it's gone so well, given all these different issues. As Dominik said earlier, it is a technical accomplishment, apart from anything else, to cope with the multicultural, the multilinguistic. I'm wondering how the online part is going to work, but perhaps we can come back to that. That sounds to me even more challenging. But Corina, anything to add in terms of the challenges? And then I have a very specific question for the plenaries, but I'll come back to that. Corina.
I'm afraid that I'd be a little bit repeating myself, but I'm just for the sake of adding to the list of things that maybe could be improved on. I understand that this first session was supposed to be broad and was supposed to sort of, as Yves called it, create common ground among the citizens present. But my feeling personally was still that too much time was spent on the general discussion about Europe and other related issues, values and so on. But at the general level, there were 3 working sessions that were dedicated to this. And in comparison, we only had 1 working group session that focused on formulating priorities for 1 single theme, and then a final work group session that directly confronted citizens with the actual streams. And the actual streams had been put together overnight by the organizers based on the priorities that were collected from the people during the day. And this final working group session only granted about an hour or so to participants to digest and reflect.
So it was quite rushed when you got to that key moment.
A little bit rushed, but okay. We have to understand that because these were the first sessions and because of all the elements that have been put on the table, all of this is it's still at the level of impressions rather than having any hard evidence of anything really at this point.
Let's get very concrete here. A question from our audience. Yves mentioned that the citizens panel's ambassadors to the conference will go to the conference plenary. What is their exact mission and what is the information they received before joining this meeting with policymakers? Did they get background notes? Are there special briefing sessions? In short, says the questioner, how do you ensure that there really is a strong link between the citizens panels and the plenary, that they do the job that they're supposed to do? Yves, Gaetane, I don't know, would you both look at Yves first?
Yes, so it's quite simple. Those ambassadors will join the plenary with the role to represent their panel. And of course, there will be a session where they will meet and greet together because each panel will send 20 citizens and there are the 27 nationals plus the president of the I that will be there. So there is a time necessary to discuss about the process. But in fact, in terms of background information, they have the background information in hands. It's more the other part that needs to get the background information. So the citizen brings the background information from the panels to influence and to generate the process of the plenary. So the plenary is a process. And the citizens will play their role in the process. So of course we are with them. They will be prepared for that. It's a session that will be debriefed between them, and they will improve their role and they will rotate in their functions to make sure that all will have access. So everything is well prepared to make sure that this interaction will happen well. Okay.
Thank you. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Gaetane, but there's another question from Daniela Vancic who says, going back to the experts issue, how will experts be chosen in the future also to ensure non-political bias? Will the online sessions allow for longer discussions between the experts and the citizens? That's from Daniela from Democracy International.
So perhaps just to go in the direction of what Yves was saying, to say that indeed we are taking this participation of the citizens component in the plenary as very seriously, and they will have preparatory meetings, they will have debriefing moments. We will really try to make a citizens component, as Yves was saying, not only the 80 from the European Citizen Panel, but also the 27 and the president of the European Youth Forum, by the way, not the I, together, because, as you know, the components are an important part of the plenary. It determines the speaking times, etc. So we will work with them as a whole, and also according to the panels and the working groups they are participating in. For the experts, we indeed we had prepared for a while a very long list of experts. We are still working on it with the help of the different services from the three institutions, but also with the help of external resources, etc. So we are building that up, and the consortium, the deliberation group, to which Yves and Mission Publique belong, then make a proposal according to what the citizens have expressed as needs. So it's very different from the first time, where, since there was no meeting between the citizens before, we had to decide ourselves who would be invited. But for the second one, we will really have this dialogue between what the citizens needs to progress and the corresponding expertise we have in our list.
And Gaetane,
and also, sorry, because it was asked also that they would have more time. Yes.
Oh yes, in the online.
They will have more time to exchange with the experts, and in a more also smaller settings, not only in plenary, even though they had sometimes in subgroup already in session 1 with some experts after the plenary. Perhaps it's something that you don't know because you needed to be there to see that, but not very long. So this time it will be, of course, much more
And you talked about now you're in dialogue with the citizens about these things, what they need, experts. Max Steuer asks, do you think there should be digital interaction between the citizens in between the sessions via a closed section of the digital platform? I don't know, does such a thing already exist? Max asks, would it help to build dialogue and common ground and get the maximum out of the 2 remaining sessions, as well as increase the representatives of the mandate of the delegates to the plenary? So Gaetane, just to follow up in terms of that dialogue with citizens, and between them, can it now continue in the background, or can it only happen when the panels formally meet?
No, of course not. We really hope that they will interact also in the intersession moments. And indeed, on the platform, we have a public space about the panel, and we have 4 private spaces for each panel. So they are all onboarding on the platform now, of course, because they will all need to be connected anyway for the online part. But also because this is a place where they can ask questions, that they can express their needs for expertise, and of course where they can interact together. At the same time, we know that the access to that intersession moment on the platform won't be equally shared. So we don't want to, I'm talking under the control of Yves here, but I think I'm saying the right thing. We don't want this to be a too strict part of the process, because then it would take away some of the people who will not do it as much as the others.
Got you, I understand.
May I just come in?
Yes, please, Dominik.
Briefly, because here I want to really second what Gaetane just said. So it is interesting, and we always have that wish from participants to do more. And I fully understand what Max is saying here, but I think we've got to be careful that at the end of the day, we're not having first-class participants and second-class participants. So there is one official process, and we need to be strict. So with regard to this process, and that process needs to deliver results. And of course, when citizens meet in Florence, in Maastricht, or in Strasbourg, they've got plenty of chances and opportunity to interact and to mingle. But still, there is one official process, and we need to have a look at this official process, need to be critical with regard to that, but that is it.
Thank you very much. There's a comment here, but I'm not going to read in detail about the experts and their background, calling for more diverse groups of experts, more from ethnic backgrounds and so on. But let me come to, there are a couple of questions relating to content. I'm going to try and squeeze, they're coming in thick and fast, the questions today. Dimitri Korpakis asks, what kind of trends are you now able to detect coming from the citizens panels? More competences for the union or fewer ones, since several of the topics, he says, that are being discussed do not fall under the competence of the EU. And Denise Cervantes says, does the conference has it already more specifically discussed minority issues, most notably discrimination, problems pertaining to the ethnic, cultural, religious minorities? As someone working in an NGO, I'd be interested. In terms of the content, let's ask a broader question here. What has struck you? I mean, it was the framing, as you've said. Did anything particular strike you in terms of the direction of travel, more, less competences, and the topics? Was there anything that struck you particularly? Who would like to come in?
I can say something to start. The good news is that citizens create their own agenda, and it's not the agenda of the NGOs, it's not the agenda of the governments, it's not the wording that they use, it's specific to their vision. And if you did follow the last session of each panel, you could see live the discussion on their agenda. And I mean, it's the thing that is astonishing is that, but positively, and it's like that with every time that you trust citizens in what they say, is that they bring their point of view. And there were strong points raised by experts, and it's not those points that are necessary in the agenda that was proposed by the citizens after their work around the tables. So it's really a citizens' agenda that is on the table, and I'm afraid that there are some points that are important for some of the civil society that will not be on the agenda of the citizens. But that's the game, and that's why we do that, is to bring something new in the discussion and seeing and understanding what is the vision of people when they are not framed in existing agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yves. Just to say, somebody did put their hands up and now has put it down. I was about to come to you, so if you do want to take the floor and speak, please put your hand up. Joydeep Mondal, let me give you the floor straight away. Joydeep, can you unmute yourself and away you go?
Hi, hello. It's my pleasure to be asking the question to you. So, Mike, I have three very specific questions to all of you.
They're going to have to be very brief if there's three of them.
Yeah, I will be very brief. Yeah. So first, I would like to understand how you were building consensus from all the data that you collect in the platform. Number one. Number two, how can you provide a quality in the decision making so there will be a very good policy, good governance? And number three, an agility, speed in the decision making. How the conference platform will provide three of us for a better policy making for European Union future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Joydeep, and very succinct indeed. Who can help Joydeep with this? So how is this consensus process going to work? Gaetane, can you help us there?
Sorry, I'm not sure if the question concerns the way inside the panels or inside the whole conference decision making.
I think it means the consensus among the citizens.
It's on the platform.
Among the citizens. So in the citizens panels.
Citizens on the platform. Sorry, you're saying two different things here.
Yeah, no, I think he is referring to how, whether by all the means of input from citizens, how do you get to a consensus? Let's focus on the panels themselves, because that's what we're talking about today. How do you build that consensus between them? And particularly given the challenges of we've talked about time and space and so on, what's the process for getting there?
Well, first of all, I think everyone who has been watching a citizens' assembly is always amazed by the way globally the dialogue is done in a very respectful and peaceful way. It's the first thing we need to say, and it's even perhaps more the case in different languages because it takes time and it really gives a very a good mood to the conversation. I would say that the first thing. So actually the most subgroups, first of all, they manage to find a consensus by themselves, right? They come up with a proposal coming from their subgroups. And then for those who have watched the plenary, it has happened that there was discussion. And so we make a vote in a way that is obviously less formal than in the parliament by making signs or applauding. And we see generally, what is kind of, but maybe Yves, you can explain a bit more how it works, but it's much more, it's informal, but very clear and very effective, I would say, but maybe you can add to that, Yves.
I don't know, as the time is limited, if we need to dig into that or if we need to open to other questions. And
there are lots of them, but if you have a brief comment to make on it, Yves.
Brief comment, no.
It's not possible. Okay, too detailed for this discussion. I totally understand. I wanted to come to the question of what happens to all of this, because we have a question from Tom Jones saying, how far do citizens reporting into the plenary expect to remain in the decision-making process? So do they just do their job and then that's it? How will decision makers give weight to citizens panels alongside organized civil society representatives? And this picks up on a point you made, Yves, where you said the citizens don't want to talk about the same things necessarily that civil society wants to talk about. So that process, and let's come to what Corina and Johannes Greubel called the big elephant in the room, the impact, where we go with it. We've talked about it before on conference conversations, but how are you going to weigh up all those different inputs and come to a final conference report, never mind what then happens to the conference report and who will play what role in that. But in terms of the development of the report, comments, if you would, on the process of, and to the degree to which the citizens really will have the voice, because everybody said this is their moment. Will it really be their moment when we get to the final report? Gaetane.
Well, I think on that from the Bible, the rules of procedures that you can all read and look at, I think it's pretty clear from there that the citizens do have a central place. And in particular, as you have seen, the panels, which are, by the way, also European and national panels who have a direct access to the plenary, I would say. And then we also have regular reports from the platform. Coming to the plenary, and the platform, as you know, is not only individual contribution. I think we should all remember that there are thousands of events happening everywhere in the member states, which are also reported there with very interesting ideas. So it's a very rich place. And as you know, also the platform has some deliberative side as well, with the possibility of commenting the ideas, and this dialogue is taking place also there in the different languages, as well with the automatic translation, which is also an innovation that we never tested. So it's an interesting part. So basically this form the basis of what the plenary is going to talk about, which is already, in terms of agenda setting, something very strong, you know. And this is translated also by the fact that, for example, it's foreseen that in the working group you have a president and then a spokesperson, and the spokesperson, for example, is chosen among the citizens who are in the working group. So by different elements like that, we've really designed a system where we've tried to put the citizens at the center. But of course, this is why we will also accompany them, because you can't just declare that. They will be facing people who have a lot of political experience, and they need to feel at ease. They need to feel their own way of interacting with them, because as Yves was saying, at least for the 80, they are not representing themselves, but they are representing the panel. So it's something more difficult for them in a way to find the right space there. So we will see, but we have tried to put at least the conditions in place that they can be influential. And let's see then how it goes, because as Yves was saying, the plenary part is totally unprecedented. I mean, we've had experience of citizens' assembly now, not so much at European level, but we've had some. For that, we will all be in the learning process, and it's going to be really interesting.
Thank you. Other comments to that point, and then I want to come to whether we can draw broader lessons that this provides a model, and come back to your point, Corina, that you made at the beginning about what's happening in Paris, what's happening in Germany. But Dominik, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I'd like to zoom out also a little bit, because there is a tendency, and I also have the tendency sometimes that we're quite technical when we talk about the conference, but we need to have that political view, of course. And when I look at the plenary, I mean, I'm rather relaxed, I would say, because the plenary will discuss things based on the ideas and the proposals of citizens. I mean, they just cannot do it in another way, because if they will do it in another way, they will have a really big problem afterwards. I mean, they can try, of course, but I'm pretty sure that they will have a problem, because citizens, they will observe the process, they will come forward with their ideas more and more, and they're also becoming more confident in the process and want to see results. So therefore, I think we can be rather relaxed. So that's just one tiny remark with regard to the conference, and also about the interplay between the plenary and the panel.
Absolutely. Corina, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, what I also find interesting is that in those rules of procedures of the conference that Gaetane mentioned, there's also a specification that any clear divergences from the positions expressed in the panels, but also at national events, will have to be reported in the proposals that the final plenary submits to the executive board. So that there's another check on to ensure that whatever input comes from the citizens' part will reflect in the final outcome.
So just so I'm clear, if you ignore something big, you've got to say why.
Yes, exactly. Right. So I think that's an interesting element that was included in the design of the plenary. But I do want to say that there's two issues here which could be important in the deliberations into decision making, apart from the process, the way it's been set up. One has to do with the fact that at the end of the day, this is a multi-level, multi-stakeholders, very complicated process. So it won't be an automatic.
Oh, we seem to have a technical issue.
Decision making, and I think it's important for the organizers and even for the political level to make sure that citizens understand how their input has been accommodated.
Absolutely. Let me just
and that there's ownership. Yeah. And the second thing is this issue that has been raised about competencies, that there could be issues that don't end up being reflected in the outcome because they're not part of the competencies of the EU. And that will probably also has to be explained on the way, and maybe fact checkers and other sorts of experts will play a role in this regard.
Thank you very much. Yves, I mean, Corina making a very good point there about it's going to be important. The citizens, have they already had it explained to them in any detail how this process works in terms of going from what they discuss and what they recommend to the final report and what happens to it. How important, and Corina warning and Dominik warning, that if leaders try to ignore what's coming out of these panels, they're going to pay a heavy price.
It's going to be a process where the clarity in the mind of the citizen will increase from session to session. I mean, those people come from very diverse walk of life. They jump into the process. Some of them, in the first session of the first panel, I asked to the panel who thought it was a joke when you received a call to be part of it. Nearly 2/3 of the citizens raised their hands. And so it's really something for them to understand exactly what is happening. So the first stake was to have them on board, to understand where they are and to interact with the others. With the process of the ambassadors, the clarity between the citizens, inside the mind of the citizens, will increase about what is the process. I mean, those plenaries are planned till March, this next year. And so the clarity is going to be higher and higher from at each session. And this is a process. So it's impossible to explain and to make sure that the 800 citizens have clearly understood at the first session what was going to happen for the next stages and the political importance of it. It's a process, it takes time, and we need to make sure that everybody stays on board. This is very important.
Thank you very much. I just want to come, before I have a final question I want to ask our guests today, but before I do that, on this question of whether this is a model, take it outside of the conference now. You're all experts in this type of process. You're looking at it. Corina, you mentioned in a question, Laszlo Molnafi asked, what were the examples of citizens' assemblies and panels listed at the start? I rather cut you short there, but I think you said Paris City Council has created a permanent assembly. Germany is looking at this. Can you just say 2 more words about, but briefly if you would, what else is out there? And then Gaetane, in terms of, and Dominik, in terms of whether you think we are building something that will have application beyond the conference. But Corina, what is a little more detail on what is actually happening?
Yes, I mean, we're seeing that the idea of citizens' participation in decision-making is becoming more mainstream to a certain extent. And I think I mentioned those examples because they're quite important examples. They're coming from key member states. They're also coming from the European Commission itself. But we shouldn't forget that, in effect, there are reports out there, and I recall now the OECD report from last year and the new one that will be coming this year, which quotes hundreds and hundreds of such citizens panels, citizens juries, and other sorts of events with citizens across the globe, from which we've built a lot of experience and from which we know that these kind of exercises work. So I think the examples that are mentioning are just the latest in a very long chain, and they're signaling the fact that there is more openness to this kind of experiments, and there is more willingness to give it a try as part of our efforts of renewing and updating democracy. And the final half a sentence that I would say about them, I think they respond to a real need in society. We see we've seen it over the past decades that citizens want to be involved. They want to be able to express themselves. And now we're also giving them a chance to be representatives of other citizens, which could, in effect, boost the representative dimension of democracy to begin with. So
thank you. Okay, I'm going to have to stop you because I need to come back to our guests before we go. Dominik, a brief word before I come to Gaetane and Yves, just in terms of its application. We're seeing those examples. There is a momentum building.
There is a momentum building, yes, but we also have to be very careful because the final model is still not clear, neither on the nation state level nor on the EU level. So we have many examples, but it's also many one-off examples, but how to embed citizens' participation or citizens' assemblies really in the representative system, that remains to be seen, and that still needs many good thoughts, and especially on the European level. Just the 2 things I think where citizens' assemblies can play a role. It's on the EU level. So it's about the big questions, also how to change the treaties. There, I think in the future, citizens' assemblies could play a role on the EU level because we're stuck there.
Okay.
And the other thing is really that every DG, parliamentary committees, they should be in a position to do citizens' assemblies on their own. So, but there, I think, as I said, so we really need to go into the details and think how to connect.
So this is a conversation maybe we need to come back to when we've had the second and third rounds of these panels and seen the outcomes. Gaetane and Yves, before we go, and I will give you as part of this question a chance to react because it may be part of your answer to my last question. It's a question I ask all our guests on Conference Conversations. I want to go back to something the European Commission Vice President and Conference Co-Chair Dubravka Šuica said in March when launching the conference. She said, the conference will enable citizens from every corner of the EU and from all backgrounds to share their ideas, hopes and dreams in shaping their union's future. Yves, you said your dream was for this to be happening at all when you first started out with Mission Publique. What is your dream in terms of the outcome of this whole process? Is it in something substantive in terms of the content, or is it linking to that conversation we were just having about this becoming part and parcel of our everyday democratic life? So Yves, what is your dream? And then Gaetane, I'll give you the last word. You're muted, Yves.
My dream is that in 10 years from now, when the citizens will receive a call saying they have been randomly selected to be part of a citizens' assembly, they will say yes, they will not love, they will not fear the call, they will understand why they are being called. And at the same time that in 10 years, no government at local, national, European level or above that will work without having a citizen assembly. And this is symbolized by the tree that I have behind me. So it's a drawing done by Gaetane after discussions with the Mission Publique team. It's citizens seated around the tree, and the roots of the tree are connected with the citizens. And this beautiful tree is called the tree of the Perma democracy. And this is what we are all working on. And this is what I hope for my 200 next years to see that emerging. And it's a democracy where we will not vote only every 6 years or 5 years, but it will be permanently organized with that form of dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Gaetane, your dream.
Well, I won't go into substance, but I really hope that some of the recommendations will clearly find their way in the system of decision making. We have to make clear that it's not direct democracy. We are not taking everything of what they will say, obviously, and we've been quite clear on that to citizens. But I think what is very important is that something is identified as a result coming from the citizens and that they can follow it. And they can follow it on the longer term, because the problem is we have a tendency to close the shop when the last event has happened, and we really need a feedback period where we can see the legislative process, what's happening. That's on substance. And on the format, of course, I think that it's going to be an incredible laboratory that I hope will continue to have effect. I think at least in 3 areas. First, of course, is the method, just to show how much indeed participatory deliberative democracy can enrich representative democracy and be a good companion. The other one is, of course, the transnational dimension of all this. This is the laboratory also for a transnational democracy that is not excluding the citizens, because we have a tendency to be very institutional when we talk about transnational democracy. And the third one for me is also specific to the EU level, because democracy in Europe is about both pan-European democracy and about Europe in the national and regional and local democracies. And I think with the conference, we are seeing both happening at the same time. And I hope that we will show that this is how democracy in Europe is strong, by doing that together and by doing the right synthesis. And the way we do the synthesis, I think, is a very interesting part also of the conference.
Thank you so much to all four of you, particularly though to Gaetane and to Yves for a great discussion. We had so many questions, we got through a lot of them, but there were many, many more. I couldn't squeeze them all in. So thank you so much for both shedding light on precisely how this process is working, but also some of the challenges, some of the ways ahead. And Gaetane, you mentioned there that national, regional, local democracy all coming together at the same time. In our next conference conversations in early November, we're going to focus on the national dimension of the conference and how it links to the European dimension, another area where we've had lots of questions from all of you about how the process really works in detail. In the meantime, do follow the Observatory on Twitter to be kept constantly informed about its activities, get updates on proceedings and developments, including this week's plenary, of course, and the Observatory's own analysis and assessment of those developments. And finally, in the spirit of participatory democracy, those of you who have joined us for previous conference conversations will know that we too like to involve you in our deliberations. And so as you log off from this event, as the meeting ends, you will see a question come up to you. And the question is, what do you want us to talk about in future conference conversations? We've had lots of fantastic input so far. It really has influenced our choice of topics and guests for the conference conversations so far. So if you could just take a moment before you leave us to fill that in, we would be very grateful. Apologies to those whose questions we couldn't take, but thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, panel. Have a very good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacki. Thank you all.